Now this is what a sleeve should look like when it is installed in lace. Notice, no armhole. We have a seam at the underarm here, but the rest, the illusion should be that the lace was actually woven to shape. To begin, this is where you're really glad you marked which sleeve faces where. So that tells you that goes to the body. So what we want to do, we're going to be sewing the underarm of the sleeve to the body first. So that involves some marking, which I will show you. We begin by looking at the underarm seam. This is the underarm seam on the sleeve. So what you want to do, I have a needle threaded with some basting thread. So you want to measure 3 inches up on one side and just make a little thread tag for reference. And then 3 inches the other way. This is going to be where we sew the seam. We will sew the seam. First off, in a moment, we'll stay stitch from here to here, and then we'll do the same thing on the bodice. So now I will go and get the bodice, bring it here, and we'll mark that as well. And here is the bodice. Now you notice I'm using the ruler underneath so I don't sew through anything I don't wish to sew through. And again, this is the side seam, the thread tracing. And so I'm going to measure up 3 inches here. And measure back 3 inches, like so. There we go. A little bit snarled, but okay. So you can see here and here, those are our marks. Our next stop is going to be the sewing machine. I'm going to sew the sleeve first. Now, one thing to know, when you put everything under the machine, you want to make sure that all the tulle is kind of out to your right. You don't want to sew through something. You don't want to catch all of this in the seam. And really, for the sleeve, you only need 1 row of machine stitching. And when you're sewing, try not to catch your basting. It'll make it a little easier to take that basting out later. So what we're doing really is we're just sewing a straight stitch. This is going to mark our underarm seam, and it will help us when we sew the two together. There's no race here. You don't have to go fast. So, as you can see, I'm just sewing. And so yes, you sew between the notches, like so. I'll remove it from the machine and show you the result. So you have just that one row of machine stitching, and later on we'll take the red basting out. Next, I will sew the underarm on the bodice. So again, like we did on the sleeve, you want to start on one of these matching notches. Now, something to know when you're sewing net like this, hold the thread. Otherwise, you're going to get a little bit of a bird's nest underneath the fabric. And so again, yes, we just sew. And we have the firehouse a block away. It's such a comfort knowing they're so close by. Especially late at night. And as we come up to the other notch, here we are. And again, I will show you the results. You can see right there. From here, we're going to go back to the work table and pin the two together. To begin, we want to match the two underarms. Let me just unpin that and show you how I saw that. See there, that's what I'm matching to here. And you want to match the two stitching lines. You can see that little stitching line there. You want to match that there we are. I can just barely see it. I want to match the two stitching lines. There's the stitching line here. Yeah, there you can see it. So we're matching those two stitching lines. We're matching the underarm seams. And then we match these two orange matching notches here. So this gets a little bit confusing because you have a lot of tool that you've got to navigate. So the trick is to have a little bit of X-ray vision. There we are. Okay, so there you can see I matched those two right along that stitch. And I'm going to work backwards the other way. And so here, there is there's our stitching line there. And turn it here. There we go. So we have the two ends matched, and we have the underarm seam matched. So really the rest of this is just to pin the two stitching lines, one on top of the other. And that's just something you have to do by eye. So there we go. So what I will do, after I have these two pinned together, I will take a needle and thread and the thread from the machine. I'm going to be using a matching thread to baste these together. That way I don't have to worry about it showing in the finished product. Okay, so there we are. Sorry about all this. I know it's like watching paint dry, but there. There. Okay, so here we are. We have the stitching lines all matched. So what I will do off camera is I will come in with some gray thread that matches, and I will sew those two lines together, because what I can do then, once I get that sewn together, is I can get rid of some of this here, so it's a little easier to go through the machine. So I will bring it back after it's been basted. So now I'm at the other matching notch here. So what I will do, now that I have this basted in place, I'm going to go in and remove all of the red basting thread. I don't want to catch that in the seam if I can avoid it. So I'm going to take all of that out. I'm going to also trim out some of this here. So I will go off camera and do that and bring it back to show you. So here we are, as you can see. I still have these little thread markings in, which I can remove. So I've hand sewn all the way. Now this cuts in about 3/4 of an inch. You don't want to cut right to there just yet on either end. We're now ready for the machine. So now it's a simple matter of sewing. Now you can see I put pins here so I know where this seam line begins and ends. It's just easy to see because I've taken the thread tacks out. And the stitch length on this is like 1.5, 1.75. You want a fairly short stitch to make it nice and strong. So what you're going to do is to sew right on that stitching line that you prepared. This will be covered in a binding later, as you know, so you don't have to worry about seeing it, but you know, it's just good to have it all match. Okay, so now I'm going to sew another row of stitching about 1/8 of an inch in from the first. Then I can trim close to that stitching later, but having 2 rows here kind of helps you to finish it, so you can use that to know where you begin your stitches. There we go. Same stitch length. We know to finish right here. Okay, so let me take this from the machine, show you the results. So you can see 2 rows of stitching 1/8 of an inch apart. Now we'll go back to the work table and I will trim away close to this row of stitching on the right. So now there is the end of the stitching. I'm going to angle this in. You'll see why in a little bit, but don't cut 90 degrees too. And then I will find the other end, which is right there. And again, I'll angle that stitching, or angle the cut a little bit in. From here, this is where we want to trim this seam allowance out. Oops, sorry. Okay, there. So there we have the underarm set, ready for the next step. So this is going to give you a little overview of where we are at this stage. You can see what we've done is we've sewn the underarm. So that's all set. And from here, what we will do, like we did on all the other seams, is to overlap and overlap, and we're going to sew the applique like we did on all of the other seams on the body. So I'm not going to show you that because we've done that before. Actually, I do have one note here. Shoulder seam on the body matches the seam on the sleeve. So this here matches this, and then from there you can work towards the underarm when you're matching and pinning and sewing. So the underarm matches and the shoulder matches. Okay, finishing up on the basting. So let me show you how this plays out for this particular sleeve in this particular lace. I started down here, and you can see it's coming up to the shoulder and then going down, and I'm going to cut across there. And again, you have to get a little bit creative sometime, and then this is where it ends. So in this particular fabric, the sleeve lapped over the body. On other fabrics, you might have to lap the body over the sleeve or do a little hybrid, but this is, actually it's looking pretty good. So now I will take this to the machine, sew it, trim it, and bring you back the finished result. And here we are, the big reveal. So you can see here, we have the underarm seam right here, but above that, all the way up and over the shoulder, around to the back, you have a nearly invisible join. So this is how we install the sleeve, and the next stop is going to be finishing the underarm inside. But let's just look at that for another few moments, because I have to say I am very pleased with how it turned out. Okay. Enough congratulating myself.